The girl would not let go of the locket, and that was the first mistake I logged against her file. I want to be precise about this, because precision is the entire discipline of my post. I was, that week, a junior intake officer for the Oshuant Compliance Directorate, Colonial Materials Division, and my function was simple. Confiscated human technology comes across my desk in crates. I classify it, I bin it, I move to the next crate. Weapons go to ordnance. Communications gear goes to signals. Anything with no demonstrable operational function goes into the bin we call, with the Directorate's usual flair for poetry, sentimental object, no operational value. The locket was a disc of scratched tin the size of a coin. Strung on a cord the girl had braided herself, badly. Inside it, a chip no larger than my smallest claw joint, holding 11 minutes of recorded audio. A man's voice, mostly. Some laughter. A recipe for something called biscuits, recited twice, the second time more carefully, as if he knew he wouldn't get a third attempt. Grandpa's voice, the girl said, when I asked her to surrender it. She was perhaps 11 cycles old by human reckoning, dust on her knees, and entirely too calm for someone whose colony had just had its technology inventoried by an armed compliance team. You can't have it. I told her, kindly, I want that on the record, kindly, that the object had no operational value and would be processed accordingly. She told me it had all the value there was. I wrote that down too, because I found it funny, and funny things go in my notes for the officer's mess. That night I read the line aloud to 4 colleagues over rations, and Chirith Varel, second tier, mining survey background, a face built for looking unimpressed, laughed so hard a piece of nutrient paste went up his nose. All the value there was, he repeated. Write that on the bin. Better yet, write it on the wall outside Director Cassin's office. I did not write it on the wall. I wrote it on the requisition form instead, under notes, because I thought it was clever, and because I did not yet understand that the Directorate keeps every form forever. The bin filled over the following days the way it always did. A hand-stitched doll, a pressed flower under glass, a child's drawing of what I assumed was a dog and turned out, for the human translator, to be the family's actual dog. We catalogued 712 items as sentimental, no operational value, in 11 days. I made the locket the centerpiece of my report to Chirith's superior, Inspector Hasker Venn, mostly because Hask liked stories where humans were foolish about technology, and Hask's good opinion mattered to a junior officer trying to make second tier before the cycle turned. Hask laughed at the right places. He always did. Filed under sentimental, he said, turning the locket over with one claw, not unkindly, the way you'd handle something already decided to be worthless. They build their memory out of tin and string. No redundant key. No backup. One scratch and the grandfather's gone forever. He set it back in the bin himself. Humans, he said, and the word did all the work a sentence usually does. I want to note, for the sake of being precise, that Hasker Venn had led the inspection team into the colony's eastern settlement 4 days prior, and that there had been an incident there, a structure entered without the proper writ, a family detained 2 hours past the lawful window, a complaint filed by the settlement's elder council that the Directorate's own oversight office was, at that time, declining to substantiate for lack of independent witness. I did not connect these two facts. I had no reason to. They lived in different drawers of my mind, the way the bin and the report lived in different rooms of the intake hall. The complaint went to appeal 11 days later. I know this only because I was summoned, not as a witness, as a records custodian, the lowest possible reason a being can be summoned to a Directorate tribunal, to confirm the chain of custody on item 0447, sentimental object, no operational value, tin locket, audio chip, human child, Eastern Settlement. I had forgotten the Eastern Settlement was where the locket came from. I had not been paying that kind of attention. Tin lockets did not, in my training, require that kind of attention. The tribunal officer played 11 minutes of recorded audio into a chamber that had heard, in its time, testimony from beings whose entire biology is built for bearing witness. Chronicler cast Velcry, whose memory organs are licensed evidence in 3 systems. The first 9 minutes were a recipe for biscuits and a man telling his granddaughter, twice, that he was proud of her for learning to braid a cord on her own. The 10th minute was the sound of a door. Voices that were not the grandfather's. A demand, in Directorate Standard, for the household's registration papers, delivered at a volume and in a tone that the tribunal officer described, reading from her own notes, as inconsistent with the writ-specified parameters. The 11th minute was mostly breathing, and one voice, young, saying she was scared, and one voice, older, saying stay still, stay quiet, It's almost over. The grandfather had not known he was making evidence. He had only known his granddaughter liked his voice and wanted more of it before there wasn't any more to have. He died, I learned afterward, 6 days after recording the chip, with no idea that the last thing he ever built would outrank an inspector's sworn report in a court he never knew existed. Hask's official statement, filed under his own seal, had described the Eastern Settlement entry as compliant and uneventful. He had not known the locket was running the whole time, tucked under the girl's collar, doing nothing anyone in my division had thought worth a classification above tin and string. The tribunal officer turned to me, the record's custodian, the one who'd written all the value there was on a form for a joke, and asked whether item 0447 had been correctly catalogued at intake. I said it had been catalogued as sentimental object, no operational value. She let that sit in the room for exactly as long as it deserved to sit, which was a long time. It is being recatalogued, she said, as primary witness testimony, Eastern Settlement incident, weight superseding Inspector Orven's filed report on grounds of contemporaneous and unprompted record. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The Chamber's recorder logged the reclassification, and somewhere in the Directorate's endless filing structure, a tin locket built by a child with no engineering training whatsoever outranked a sworn inspector's official account of his own conduct. Hask Orven did not laugh about humans again in my hearing. He was reassigned to a Records Archive Post 3 systems out, the kind of posting the Directorate gives officers it can no longer trust near writ. I went back to the intake hall the next morning and found the bin still labelled Sentimental Object, no operational value, 711 items deep, 1 item lighter, the label itself somehow heavier than before. I did not relabel it that day. I sat with it a while first. Cherith came by at the regular hour, expecting more material for the mess hall, and asked what was funny today. Nothing, I told him, and for the first time since I'd taken this post, I meant it as a serious answer rather than a deflection. I requisitioned a new bin 2 days later. I labelled it, in the plain Directorate script we use for things we have learned to take seriously, Human-Constructed Personal Record. Disposition pending review. It is a longer label. It takes up more of the form. I have never once heard anyone laugh while reading it. The girl, when the chain of custody process finally returned the locket to her, 3 months later, through channels I will not pretend I understood at the time, said only that she told me so. She did not gloat. She did not need to. She put the cord back around her neck, the badly braided one she'd made herself, and walked out of the intake hall like a being who had never doubted, for one moment, that her grandfather's voice was admissible evidence of every value there was. I kept her line in my private notes, where Cherith can't find it anymore. Not for the mess hall. For myself, on the days I forget what 11 minutes of tin and string can outrank, if you let it run long enough, and nobody stops to call it nothing.